Hello and welcome back to the MMA India Show. I'm your host Parvin Dabas and this is Jitendra Khare, a very well-known the head coach of Team Relentless, and your fighters are, of course, they travel the world fighting at different competitions, and hopefully someday soon in the UFC as well. So one of the premier coaches in the country, and soon to go back to fighting yourself. No? Yeah, but you have fought previously.
Yeah.
You have you fought amateur or professional as well?
No, so I haven't fought MMA, but I'm an active grappling competitor. I'm a purple belt BJJ.
Okay, yes, of course.
Yeah, I'm fighting.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'd soon like to make my...
So this is going to be your first MMA fight?
Yeah, hopefully this
So
year.
how is it going to feel now that you're on the other side of, because you've been training your students, getting them ready, and now you're going to be kind of in their place? Are any of them going to be cornering you?
Yeah, I'm sure I have my training partners that will corner me.
And do you have like a fight where you want to fight in mind?
Not yet. So till April, I have a busy calendar with my grappling events.
Yeah.
So I'll be doing the WPJJC in April.
Yeah.
And post that, I'll have like to sit down and decide when I'm fighting and then start a training camp. But yeah, hopefully this year.
Awesome. We're going to be back with you in just a second. Okay, we're back with me, your host, Parvin Dabas, and Mr. Jitendra Khare. And we are going to talk UFC Charlotte, which is happening over the weekend. Saturday, America time, Sunday morning, India time. You know, as we know, we all have our breakfast with the UFC events and, brunch right after it. So, first of all, I want to talk about two main fights, and of course, I want to talk about something specific about the main fight. Now, first of all, coming to the co-main event, which is Dennis Bermudez versus Andre Fili. Now, both of them have kind of similar records. I think 16-5, 17-5. Dennis Bermudez, of course, has a win over Max Holloway. Andre Fili has a loss to Max Holloway, who's the current champ, of course. And I think Dennis Bermudez has, let me just see his record. I've got to keep my cheat notes with me. And this is why we keep our phones handy with our UFC app. Okay, now coming to Dennis Bermudez. He has, okay, so that wasn't him. He's coming off of two losses actually.
Yeah.
To Darren Elkins, and which was at last in July, and to Jan Sung Jung, and before that he had two wins, Ronnie Jason and Tatsuya Kwajari, and before that again he had two losses, Jeremy Stevens and Ricardo Lamas. So he's had a tough time actually if you look at it. Just two wins in his last six fights. In his last six fights he's 2-4. So I would say that's a little tough, and he needs to come back. So he will be looking to get a win, and of course he has a very strong wrestling background with a high school record of 112 wins and 23 losses. Now coming to Andre Fili, and I think again, even though Dennis Bermudez does have a very strong stand-up game as well, but this will kind of do with what we are going to talk about for the main event as well, and which is why I wanted to bring you on as a specialist to talk about this. Now, Andre Fili, of course, has, just like I said, had a win over Artem Lobov. Before that, had a loss to Calvin Carter, who had a very impressive win at this UFC 220. And he's also had a loss against Yair Rodriguez.
Yeah.
So his last four fights are 2-2. He's also had a loss to, not also, because Dennis Bermudez has a win over Max Holloway, but he has a loss to him. Now, so both of them, even though he's coming off of a win, a little more momentum, but both of them, are in a similar boat where they do want to start. Dennis Bermudez has to start a winning streak, and Andre Fili wants to extend it. But coming back to, what I want to talk about is that is again kind of, even though Dennis Bermudez has a strong stand-up game, but he's got a very strong ground game, with his wrestling. Now, when you train, your fighters as well, when somebody has a strong ground game, and I think Team Relentless is one of the few teams in India with very good jiu-jitsu and grappling skills. How do you approach it? when somebody else, the other guy has a very strong stand-up game. Of course, you're always looking to take it to the ground, but it's easier said than done because in MMA, anything can happen. One punch can change, and we have seen there are weapons for the guys who want to take the other person down, like Yoel Romero did against Chris Weidman. There's always the flying knee as the person is coming down. How do you train? What are the situations you set up for fights like these?
So yeah, the key thing is, again, what you can never take away is the puncher's chance. But I think one of the key things that we work on is, always moving forward. Now, knowing the fact that our guys have a good ground game.
Yeah.
What happens is people are usually aware of the fact that our guys are going to shoot, and that leaves us with a lot of opportunities to even open up our stand-up game. Because what happens is once the opponent is, trying to look at only the wrestling aspect of it, okay, a lot of things change. And that's the beauty of MMA, right? A lot of things change. Because now they're going to try and keep a lower stance. They're going to not have their hands up so high because they want to drop their hands so that they can sprawl or, block the shoot. And that opens up a lot of chances in the striking game as well.
Like Khabib did with Edson Barboza recently.
Yeah.
I mean, he showed an amazing, striking game to soften them up.
Yeah. And if you think about it, this is something that people always talk about is, how grapplers have improved their striking game. The question to ask is it really that their striking game has improved? Or is it that the fear of their grappling gives the opportunity for them to open up with striking as well? Because now, if you're fighting a striker, he's well aware of the fact that you want to close the distance. You want to try and get into a clinch or push him to the cage. So, he's not going to be playing his natural game.
Yeah.
He's not going to be opening up with strikes that much. Be it, leg kicks. Now, that's a great opportunity for a good grappler to take a guy down. So that takes away a lot of weapons from a striker's arsenal. Having said that, what you cannot also neglect is you cannot just close the distance. You still need to strike to close the distance. So it's always going to be a mix of both.
Yeah. So I think this fight, particularly because of their records as well, is going to be 50-50.
So I think though their records are pretty similar, if you just look at the kind of pedigree of fighters they fought, I'll lean towards Dennis Bermudez because he's fought a lot of good guys and he's been there doing that for a long time. He lost to Diego Brandao, but even if you look at that fight, he was dominating that fight till he got caught.
Yeah.
So I think I would still lean towards Dennis Bermudez. But
so you're willing to put your money where your mouth is?
Let's do it.
500 की लगी?
लगी.
ये on camera 500 का लगा रहे हैं जितेंद्र खारे के साथ, and we will collect. Okay, so we will be sure to collect, and things just got a lot more interesting, of course. And coming now to the main event, I'm really excited for this fight because Jacare Souza was on a tear. Of course, he was looked as one of the number one contenders, but of course, after his loss to Robert Whittaker, who now became champ, even though Rockhold and Yoel Romero are now going to fight for the interim belt. He was on a tear. He did lose before that to Yoel Romero, but that was a little. I remember seeing that fight, and that was a split decision. A split decision can always go any way. And I do remember after that, I don't know if it was overturned to a no contest or something because Yoel Romero was cited for some USADA violation or something. As far as I remember, though it's still showing as a decision split in Yoel Romero's favor, but as far as I remember, it was overturned with some problems that Yoel has had from time to time. The Cubans and South Americans have, and of course a lot of Americans as well, but great for USADA coming in. Now, after that, Ronaldo Jacare made a comeback with wins over Vitor Belfort and Tim Bosch before losing to Robert Whittaker by TKO. Now, again, that was your classic great stand-up game by Robert Whittaker against Jacare wanting to take him down, but standing and exchanging to soften him up. Like you rightly said, it opens up the other guy, and everybody has to have a very good stand-up game, nowadays. And Derek Brunson, we were just talking previously, and you did mention that he's got, he's a purple belt.
He's a purple belt.
And
an NCAA Division II wrestler.
Yeah, and he's a good wrestler as well, but maybe not in the class of the ground game of Jacare. Because Derek Brunson is known mostly for his stand-up game, and I think a lot of his recent wins have happened by a knockout as well.
So I think two things that we'd have to keep in mind when we discuss this fight. One is Jacare is probably the top 3 BJJ players to ever fight MMA: Damien Maia, Roger Gracie, and Jacare. Okay. So definitely, if the fight goes to the ground, more often than not, he's going to finish it by an arm triangle. Or just beat him up for 5 rounds. But the question that always arises with Jacare is, will he be able to get the takedown? And we've seen that was an issue with Yoel Romero and Robert Whittaker, and that both of that resulted in losses for him. So, will Brunson's wrestling be good enough to stop Jacare from taking him down? And I think the second thing we need to keep in mind is in their first encounter, Jacare knocked him out in 41 seconds. And that's where, the point of the fact that maybe because Brunson knew he's going to take him down, that opened up opportunities for Jacare to strike. And, that was evident in their first fight.
So, which was amazing that he lost to Souza via punches, like you rightly said. And he does, of course, he has a loss to Yoel Romero as well. Now, after his loss to Yoel Romero, was on a tear again, 1, 2, 3. He had a 5-fight winning streak, the last one against Uriah Hall, before again losing to Robert Whittaker, the now champion, and also to Anderson Silva in a unanimous decision, which he felt was a little...
which was a very controversial
decision, but unanimous. And then after that, he's of course come up with 2 wins, both by knockout punches against Dan Kelly and Lyoto Machida, who's trying to make a comeback, who's going to be headlining the next fight card now. Now, I'm a big fan of Lyoto Machida, of course, but he's not been the same since he's, coming back. But this fight, of course, is Ronaldo Jacare Souza against Derek Brunson. And Souza is known as the alligator, because once he gets his, let's say his, jaws around you, he's not letting go, So what's your take of this fight? Especially, it's the second time they're fighting, but Derek Brunson has become much more evolved. Since his couple of losses, he's come back strong, and Jacare needs to come back really strong, because he does see himself, and a lot of people do see himself as, very strong contender in what is a very strong division as well. So how do you see this fight? What do you see the strategy of both these fighters going into, the main event?
I still believe that the fight's going to come down to the simple question whether Jacare can take Brunson down. If he takes Brunson down, I personally don't think that Brunson has the kind of jiu-jitsu that can stop Jacare from submitting him. I mean, that's just my take on it. But the question that arises is, will he get the takedown?
Because, what I want to come to is, see, a guy with a really good stand-up game, what's going to happen when you go in. You know the other guy, and you're practicing for that. If you watched, the countdown, Road to UFC countdown show as well, you see him practicing stuffing takedowns a lot, because he knows that's what he's going to be doing. But of course, the fight is a whole different game. When you're training, it's a whole different thing. And when you're actually in the fight, the atmosphere is different. There's a lot of different things, and the guy in front also knows that the other guy is. You kind of know what the other is expecting. So from that viewpoint, okay, he's going to try to stuff. How do you see this fight?
So I think since their last fight, if you think about it, even Jacare's stand-up has evolved a lot. I mean, you have to give credit where it's due, and it has evolved a lot. And I think, it's going to be again a grappler versus a striker fight, where Brunson's going to try and keep him away. And Brunson's no slouch in terms of the wrestling department as well. So, it's not like he cannot stuff the takedowns. The question is Jacare striking enough for him to be able to get the takedown? I think I see Jacare winning this fight.
Yeah.
I think Jacare is going to get that takedown and probably going to get that finish.
And he did win the first time via, punches.
Yeah.
But let's, get. Do you think it's enough? Do you think it's going to be via takedown, or do you think he's again going to do it via, like punches?
So I would like to see him submit Brunson.
Yeah.
But like I said, the fact that we all know that Jacare is going to do that might just open up that chance of a punch again.
Now, of course, this is one thing I wanted to touch about on the actual, how a fighter is thinking in the actual fight, because a lot of it is the decisions you make in the moment. You can plan as much as you want, but it's literally split second, timing sometimes. Whether you're able to evade and take the takedown, whether the other guy, can get that flying knee in or stuff it. And, it is a lot about reflexes and who's faster in that moment. And there's only so much you can plan, and that's why we say anything can happen in the MMA. It is very possible that Derek Brunson can finish him off.
Yes. So how many people did actually give Robert Whittaker a chance to finish Jacare, and that too via TKO? So I think it's leaves the opportunity for both the fighters to finish fights. But having said that, I guess when you're preparing for a fight, like my coach Nick used to say, it's not about preparing for a plan. Okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to throw my right, because that becomes wishful thinking.
Yeah.
It's about preparing for scenarios.
Yeah.
Okay, and then drilling those scenarios.
Yeah.
So I'm sure where Brunson's training to stuff Jacare, at the same time Jacare is also training to take him down
and get past that stuff.
Past that stage, yeah.
So how would if somebody's trying to let's say I'm trying to take somebody down, the other guy, I know he's going to try to stuff me. How do you get past that? Technically,
so,
just like
various ways. I mean, in terms of for all I mean, if you see Damian Maia, we've seen that in Damian Maia Jorge Masvidal fight.
Yeah.
He shot in and Masvidal would stuff.
Yeah.
Damian Maia was even happy pulling guard from there. So I think it all depends on, like you said, what happens in the fight.
Yeah.
If Jacare does feel that he could even get off by pulling a guard on Brunson and converting that into a grappling match, I'm sure he would do that. And we all know that Jacare has a very aggressive style of grappling.
Yeah.
He's always very aggressive. I think one of the best top controls in BJJ, possibly. So you never know. I mean, if he does get stuffed, would it come to a point where he wouldn't even mind pulling guard? But then you're always running the risk of a heavy-handed guy like Brunson throwing down at you. So again, I guess it's going to be a spur of a moment decision.
So you're going with Jacare again?
Yes.
You're willing to put your money where your mouth is again?
Let's do it.
Ek 500 ki shart lagi.
So I'm going to have a good payday.
Yeah, 1,000 rupees. Let's see whether it evens out or not. But now, again, coming to, the stand-up versus ground game, I want to just go back a little. We were, of course, live at UFC 220, where Stipe Miocic showed a brilliant strategy. People were thinking, okay, he's going to probably try to take it. But he showed amazing reflexes. And Francis Ngannou didn't know what was happening because he was coming on such a big hype train, of course, and rightly so. The knockout of Overeem was like, it became like he became a global phenomenon because of that. And even before that, he was knocking everybody out, and he finished somebody, I think, by inverted arm triangle or some kind of an arm bar or something. One of his finishes was by that, which was like, okay, so you thought maybe he does have some kind of ground game. But Stipe showed amazing, and I did bring this up in the pre-fight chat with Chamatkar, because if you look at the fight with Fabricio as well, he showed amazing reflexes again in a counter game where he allowed Fabricio to come and he just backed off and won counter punch, and Fabricio got knocked out. So he does have great, for a heavyweight, He's got great cardio, he's got great reflexes, and he showed, if you see the fight again or some of the highlights, he's literally, that typical boxer of evading. He's like, and there's a couple of times there where Francis is like, and he literally frustrated Francis, attacked him with counter punches, and at every opportunity took him to the ground, and then Francis didn't know kind of what he was doing on the ground, or Stipe's ground game was just too good.
So a couple of things in that fight. I think one is what people underestimated was Stipe's chin and the fact that even he's a Golden Glove boxer. So it's not like he's just a grappler and he knows no striking. So that's something which I think people...
No, I don't think anybody underestimated his striking. They just thought, and they underestimated, like you rightly said, his chin. Because of the way Francis Ngannou was...
We've seen that with Overeem, right? We've seen him getting tagged with Overeem. And still come back and win the fight. So I think, and I personally think that Francis, if you look at drawing parallels, I think Brunson and his level of wrestling, for me personally, I think would be still way higher than, Francis's level of grappling. So I think Brunson definitely has a higher level of grappling, where if you draw a parallel to Francis. So it's not going to be that easy for Jacare to take him down as it was for Stipe. Plus, I think also one thing that came into picture was their cardio, which I think we all saw, Francis break after, probably in the second round itself. And Stipe being an NCAA Division 1 wrestler, I think he could wrestle all day. He could wrestle all day.
Which he did. But by the end of it, of course, both of them were tired. But I mean...
that's heavyweights for you.
I love that fight, and of course, next for Stipe is, if Kane comes back and people are throwing DC's name around, because there's nobody else. Which fight, because he's already gone through it, like he rightly said, the MMA India Show was there live for the post-fight conference also. He's gone through murderer's row to get where he has, and as well to defend the title. He's been through everybody. The only guy he has to fight now is Cain Velasquez, which depends when he's ready to come back fully healthy, and that's why Dana White did throw up DC Daniel Cormier's name, and he said, listen, if he doesn't want to, because Cain Velasquez is his teammate, if he wants to vacate it, then he can. But that shows a real lack of competition now for Stipe, that you are ready to give it to the light heavyweight champion. But of course, that would be a super fight. And say, if he doesn't want to fight after that, let him, vacate it. But it is a great fight to make.
So I think, for me personally, and this is, the discussion that I was having with a couple of guys in my team the other day, I think the only guy that out there that will be able to challenge Stipe at the current moment would be Kane. The only question is, will Kane ever make it to the octagon? And that is the big question.
Well, he's trying now. He's back in training.
So personally, I think Kane's probably the greatest heavyweight of all time if he fights.
Over Stipe.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's a match that will be a dream match to watch, a dream heavyweight fight to watch.
तो उसके ऊपर हम 2000 का लगाएंगे.
Done.
जब
Kane
वो
all
होगा,
the way.
तो 2000 का लगेगा.
Yeah, but I think, a DC... the fact that DC is out there in the contention just shows that there are no good heavyweights left for Stipe. And it will be an interesting fight again. It will be a very interesting fight. I would go with Stipe in that purely because of, the fact that both their wrestling pedigrees are great. But Stipe's hands, I would take over, DC's hands any day. Okay, great. So we are going to invite you to the post-fight chat as well, mainly to see, what won the money. Mainly to see who won the money, and so everybody can see is whether you pay me or not for it. Sure, done. Right? Because पैसा जीतेंगे तो बनाने ना वापस. And also to dissect whatever we've spoken about, and to see whose strategy was stronger and who comes up on top, and and in hindsight we can always be experts, of course, but we will dissect what we said there today, and we will make sure we pay each other, if depending on who wins. And have our I told you so moment. And have our I told you so moment. So until then, UFC Charlotte is going to be on in India time
Sunday morning, either 7:30, 8:30. Sony ESPN पे देख लेना. हम भी announce करेंगे. We will put out the graphics as well of the time. We will tell you the exact time soon. Like I said, 7:30, 8:30, 7:30 बजे उठ के TV Sony ESPN on कर लेना और फिर जब आएगा तो देख लेना. We will also check which of the channels it's going to come on, because the last fight came on Sony 10:3. I think that was because there was a lot of live fights that morning. But this one may go back to Sony ESPN and Sony ESPN HD. We will check and announce that for you. Until the post-fight chat, this is me, Parvin Dabas, your host of the MMA India Show, and Mr. Jitendra Khare. Thank you so much for coming, and we will see him soon to collect. Cheers.